Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Amaka and this is Lizama Stitches. Now this is the sewing part of this tutorial. In case you've not seen how I drafted this pattern, I'm going to leave the link of that video in the description box below so that you can check it out later. If you've not subscribed to this channel, please click on the subscribe button and also turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified whenever I upload new videos. So let's get started. Now this is the front panel, this is the center front, this is the side front, and this is the yoke. I've added half-inch seam allowance here. I added half-inch seam allowance here. I added half-inch seam allowance here and here. So I have two here. I'm using the main fabric to line it. I have the lining and the main fabric here, lining and main fabric, and this is the back panel. I have the lining and the main fabric here. This is the lower part. This is the lower part. I have the lining and the main fabric here. The same thing with this one. So let me show you how to join it. So I'm going to start by sewing the yoke. I'll sew here with half-inch seam allowance. After sewing with half-inch seam allowance, I'll notch. After notching, I'll put the seam allowance on the lining and top stitch. After that, I'll sew this with half-inch seam allowance and I'll sew here and stop here. I'll sew here and stop here. This part will still be open. Then I'll turn it from here to the right side. This part will be open. I'll turn it to the right side from here. From here, I'll turn it to the right side. So that's it with the yoke. For the front panel, I'm going to place this on this right side facing right side, and I'll sew with half-inch seam allowance. And I'll do the same thing on this one. I'll sew here with half-inch seam allowance and I'll turn it. Before I do that, I'm going to iron interfacing on my main fabric and on the lining. So the same thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to do on the lining. Then for the back panel, I'm going to close the dart. I'll close the dart. So I'll do it and show you the next thing to do. Now I've finished joining it. Now this is the front panel. I've joined it. This is the main fabric. Now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring this one. I'll bring this lower part. Now you see that they are equal. So I'm going to place it this way and I'll sew. I'm going to place it right side facing right side and I'll sew with half-inch seam allowance. I'll sew with half-inch seam allowance and I'll drop it. Now the same way I'm going to join this, I'm also going to join the lining. Now this is the lining. Now take note, I've ironed interfacing on my fabric and I've joined it. The same thing with the main fabric. I notched and I pressed it. So now after joining the lining that way, after attaching this part to the lining, now this is the yoke. This is the yoke. I've ironed the yoke. I've sewn the yoke and I ironed it. So now I'm going to place, after joining this part, I'm going to place the yoke this way. So I'm going to place the yoke this way and I'll bring the lining and I'll join the lining with the main fabric just like this. I'm going to sew it right side facing right side. I'll join it and I'll sew it. I'll sew with half-inch seam allowance. After sewing with half-inch seam allowance, I'll notch. After notching, I'll put the seam allowance on the lining and top stitch. I'll also, now the same way I'm going to join this part to the main fabric, I'm also going to join this part to the lining. So that is it with the front panel. Now for the back panel. Now this is the back panel. This is the back panel. So I'm going to place, now you see that they are equal. You see that they are equal. So I'm going to place this on this right side facing right side and I'll sew. I'll sew with half-inch seam allowance and I'll put it down. And I'll do the same thing on this one. The same way I'm going to fix this. I'm going to sew this. You see that they are equal. I'm going to place it this way and I'll sew. Place it right side facing right side and I'll sew with half-inch seam allowance and I'll drop it. Now the same way I'm going to join this, I'm going to join the lining. So I'm going to do it and show you. I'm going to do all these things I just said. Then I'll show you the next thing to do. So now I've finished sewing. This is the front panel. Now this is the front panel. This is what I did after joining it this way. This is inside, this is the wrong side, and this is the right side. So the seam allowance is inside. So this is it. Now this is the back panel. I've joined the lower part. I've attached the lower part, and I've also joined the neckline. Now after joining the neck, I notched. After notching, I pushed the seam allowance on the lining and top stitched, and I've also joined this part. So now the next thing, I'm going to show you the next thing to do. Now this is what I'm going to do. Now this is the front panel and this is the back panel. So I'm going to place it this way, right side facing right side. Now this is main fabric to main fabric, and this is lining to lining. So I'm going to join the sides, right side facing right side, and I'm going to sew with 1.5 inches seam allowance. My seam allowance is 1.5 inches, so I'm going to sew with 1.5 inches seam allowance. And after sewing the main fabric, I'll also sew the lining. I'll join the lining this way, and I'll sew with 1.5 inches seam allowance. I'll sew it. Now the same way I'm going to join this, I'm also going to join the sides of this. Now after joining the sides that way, now let me show you how to join the shoulder. So this is the shoulder. Now this is how to join the shoulder. I'm going to turn it right side to right side, and I'm going to now this is the back panel. So I'm going to hold the shoulder this way, and this is the front panel. I'm going to hold the shoulder this way, and I'm going to place it main fabric to main fabric, right side facing right side, and this is lining to lining, lining to lining, right side facing right side, and I'm going to sew. I'll sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now after sewing, I'll turn it. When I turn it, the seam allowance will be inside. So the same way I'm going to do this, I'm also going to do this. So I'll do it and show you the next thing to do. So now after sewing, this is what I have. Now when you open inside, now this is inside. You see how neat inside is. You're not seeing the seam allowance. It's only the zipper allowance that is open. So now the shoulder, look at the shoulder, the seam allowance is inside. So when I turn it to the right side, now this is the front panel. This is the front. See how the front is. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the gathers. Now the full length of my dress is 40 inches. Now the 40 inches, while from here the half length is 16 inches, and here to here is 9 inches. Now 16 plus 9 inches gives you 25 inches. So this is my 25 inches. Now my half length is 16 inches plus this 9 inches. From here to here is 9 inches. That gives you 25 inches. So now the gathers, what is left is 15 inches. Now when you minus 40 minus 25 inches gives you 15 inches. So the length of my gathers is going to be 15 inches. Now I've cut out my gathers, 15 inches plus 1/2 inch seam allowance, which I'm going to use to join this to the upper part, and 1 inch hemming allowance gives you 16.5 inches. So what I have here is 16.5 inches. Now I'm going to bring this. Now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to gather this. I'm going to gather this on this, just like this. I'll gather it like this. I'm going to use gather stitches. I'll sew this with gather stitches and I'll gather it. Then after which I'm going to gather it on this part. Gather it from here to here to here. So I'll do it and show you the outcome. So this is the fabric I'm using for the puffy sleeve. The length of my sleeve is going to be 8 inches. Now I'm using 4 inches for the fullness. 4 inches, that is to fold it. For it to have that folding or the fullness, I'm using 4 inches. Is it 4 inches allowance or 4 inches ease, I'm going to call it. And I now have, that gives you 12 inches. That gives you 12 inches plus 1/2 inch seam allowance, which I'm going to use to join this to the shoulder, and 1.5 inches hemming allowance. Now that 1.5 inches hemming allowance is the casing. 1.5 inches casing, which is also the hemming allowance. So that's what I have here. Now the width of this fabric is, my fabric is 60 inches. I'm going to fold the sleeve into 2, and from here I'll go in by 3 inches. I'll go in by 3 inches from here, and from here I'll come down by 4 inches. And I'll just cut off this part. Take note, I folded my fabric into two. My fabric is folded into two. It's on fold. So I'm going to cut this part. This is my sleeve. This is my sleeve. Now I've created the channel for the elastic. I've created the elastic casing. So I'm going to, and this is my elastic. My elastic is 10 inches. This is just exactly my round sleeve measurement. So I'm going to, now this is my needle and thread. I'm going to pin my needle and thread this way. And I'll use it to fix in the elastic into the casing. So now I'm going to go and sew this. I'll sew this. After sewing it, I'll turn this way, and I'll sew. I'll sew with 1 inch seam allowance. I'll sew it with 1 inch seam allowance. Then I'll attach this part to my dress. So the same way I'm going to do this, I'm also going to do the other sleeve. Now this is what I have. This is what it looks like after sewing. I'm going to wear it and show you what it looks like. If you found this tutorial helpful, please click on the like button. Share this video with your friends. Share this video in your sewing groups. Subscribe to my channel if you've not done so. Feel free to ask questions. I'll be in the comment section to answer all your questions. We've come to the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.